No one is asking the American public whether they want another regime change war. No one is asking Trump voters whether they want another regime change war. Nobody cares. So it's going to happen no matter what people think. In fact, if it does happen, it will likely happen at a time when most Americans had no idea it was about to happen. In other words, it'll be a huge surprise to everyone if this happens.
Tucker Carlson believes that we are going to engage in a regime change war with Venezuela, whether we like it or not. What are your 2 cents, Cenk?
Yeah, I think this is part of the Great Awakening. So this isn't just about Israel or Epstein anymore. Now we're talking about, wait, we said anti-war. Why are we starting a giant war with Venezuela? I think Tucker's about to ask some really interesting questions.
Absolutely. So the Trump administration claims that they are bombing these fishing boats off the coast of Venezuela because they are actually drug traffickers. And we are now engaged in an entirely new militarized drug war. Which, by the way, even if that were true, it's a pretty disastrous way of responding to the overdose epidemic here in the United States, where close to 100,000 people are dying, mostly from fentanyl every year. Now, Tucker Carlson doesn't believe this is about drugs, so he weighs in on what he thinks this is really about. Let's take a look.
It's about drugs. That's what we've been hearing now. It's about drugs. But how significant is Venezuela in the hemispheric drug trade? Like if you're looking at the drug trade in the United States, how much of that comes from Venezuela? Well, we have a fentanyl crisis famously. Does fentanyl come from Venezuela? No, it doesn't. Actually comes from Mexico. Huh. What about meth? Well, meth also comes from Mexico. What about cocaine? That would be Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia.
You know, I gotta say, he's very informed on this. And when it comes to foreign policy topics, he's more informed than I previously gave him credit for, because he's totally right, by the way, in regard to which drugs are actually harming Americans, where the drugs are coming from, and how in the grand scheme of things, Venezuela is not a major player in the drug trade. And so it's important to know that when you're hearing the narrative from the Trump administration in regard to the military buildup that we're now seeing off the coast of Venezuela. Now, he then hits at Senator Lindsey Graham, and I really enjoyed this for a number of different reasons. Let's watch the clip first, and then I'll tell you why.
Venezuela is now partnering with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is running out of money because Iran is weak.
That's not new.
Partnering with drug cartels in Venezuela. No, it should have stopped. Here's what's new. You got a commander in chief that's not going to put up with this crap. We're not going to sit on the sidelines and watch boats full of drugs come to our country. We're going to blow them up and kill the people that want to poison America. And we're now going to expand operations, I think, to the land.
We're not going to torture you by replaying that tape, but if you rewind it in your spare time to the point where he says, and I'm quoting, "We're going to kill people," you can see a little shiver of excitement go through his aging frame. We're going to kill people. We're going to kill people, and we're going to kill them, as Lindsey Graham just explained, because Hezbollah in Lebanon. Okay, what does that have to do with us? Have a lot of Americans been killed by Hezbollah in the United States with money from Venezuela? If so, when did that happen? Can you prove it?
That's a good question. And obviously he's implying here, why are we engaging in a potentially devastating war when Hezbollah isn't harming Americans? So why would we do this? And I think that's a important statement to make. And guys, even if you don't like what's happening in Venezuela, and that's totally fine. I don't like what's happening in Venezuela. It doesn't mean that I want to use our resources and risk the lives of our soldiers in engaging in a regime change war in Venezuela because I don't like the regime there.
Yeah. So first of all, to that point, that's a lot of these points are actually super simple. What's different now than before is the right wing is also making those simple, correct, obvious points.
I know, but it's like the most white pilling thing that's happening in the country right now.
No, absolutely.
Is that blue I see?
Is that a white pill you see?
Yes, it is.
So look, again, I've been saying this the last couple of days and weeks. This is the Great Awakening, because why are we invading these countries? No one ever asked before, right? So we told you all the time, MSNBC, Fox, CNN do the culture wars where they give the fake appearance that they disagree. But when it comes to economic issues, donor issues, including war, they all agree. They all magically agree, we gotta go to war, we gotta go to war. We have to go to war with Iran for Israel. We have to let Israel, we cannot question their funding. You must send them money for war. We must go to war with Venezuela. So when Tucker Carlson and others were on Fox News, let's be honest, they were not saying these things because Rupert Murdoch paid them a ton of money to do pro-war propaganda.
Yes.
Which, by the way, to Tucker's credit, he's partly apologized for, right?
Not partly. He has expressed remorse in going along with the neocons during the Bush era multiple times. And that's what made me open up to the idea of going on his podcast, because that means he has a level of self-awareness that honestly is not prevalent among media people in the United States.
Yeah, and so to your point, Anna, and Tucker's point, so China is got concentration camps for the Uyghurs. That's the ethnically Turkic group inside China that my family was named after, okay? That doesn't mean I think we should go to war with China.
That would be a bad idea.
I don't want World War III. North Korea is being absolutely vicious to its own citizens. It breaks my heart every day, but they have an enormous number of missiles, including maybe nukes, pointed at Japan, South Korea, and maybe even us. No, I don't think we should go to war with North Korea, even though they're bad guys, terrible guys. So this simplistic thinking is all we had in mainstream media. They claim to be the most educated, elite, smartest people in the country, and they get together on these cable news and talk like a bunch of morons in like the most simplistic ways. Saddam is a bad guy. He comes from the general area that Al-Qaeda came from.
Cenk, right? So look, usually I would push back because I think sometimes you're a little unfair to media, right? But I literally had an experience with this week. So on Abby Phillips's show, we talked about what's happening with the military buildup off the coast of Venezuela. And as you know, it's a debate panel show. So there were supporters of what's going on, including a former lieutenant governor, I forget her name, Betsy something. But anyway, we're all engaging in this conversation as if, no, the narrative that this is all about stopping the flow of drugs into the United States is true. Like we're just taking that at face value. And literally multiple times in the context of that segment, I'm like, this isn't about drugs, this is about regime change. Now look, I actually don't think that there's only one factor motivating what the US government is doing right now. And to be fair to Tucker Carlson, he also brought up in his monologue that there are very wealthy and influential Venezuelan exiles living in South Florida who are engaging in our system of political corruption. Remember our Secretary of State, he's Cuban American, of course. He's from Florida. Who knows how many of those folks have donated money to him? So corruption plays a role in this as well. There are Venezuelans who want regime change in Venezuela, and they will fund our government to make that happen.
So a bunch of things about that. One, our former managing editor, Jonathan Larsen, make sure you check him out on Substack. He's written about this. They're actually very wealthy and oftentimes criminal elements in Venezuela trying to get themselves and their money out. They're working with the people who are giving us the evidence about Venezuela's wrongdoing. So be super wary of that. Number two, did you notice the conversation stopper that Lindsey Graham was trying to say? He's like, well, they're working with Lebanon and Hezbollah, and so obviously we have to invade them. And no one ever asked before on the right, before Tucker and Candace started doing it, wait, why is that an end of the conversation? So Israel wants us to invade Venezuela, so we must invade Venezuela.
Yeah.
Why is it we must, and why is the conversation over when you say the magic word Hezbollah? Even if that were true, by the way, where did that information come from? The two guys who've been giving us fake intelligence that Jonathan Larsen wrote about.
Hey, Lindsey, you got anything to say about the Al-Qaeda terrorist that the United States is now supporting because he's the new leader of Syria? Any words on that?
And then Tucker did something very important. And Rand Paul, by the way, made a really great point. We're gonna come back to that in a sec about this too. But he said, can you prove it? Can you prove any of this? Can you prove that the drugs are coming from Venezuela and that it's fentanyl and that it was on the boats and that there is a connection to Hezbollah and it matters?
Let's go to that clip right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's this circular argument. Who are terrorists? Well, the people I tell you who are terrorists. And what are terrorists? They're people who kill people in a terroristic way. And they're terrorists because I tell you they do this. It's like it's this circular argument with no proof presented. And I guess what gets me about my colleagues is they seem to think that these people are less than human. They're not even deserving of the respect of animals. Just kill them. And it's sort of this laughing sort of ha ha ha, these are really bad people that gets to me is that, well, what if you're wrong? Civilized people don't do this. And it's not gonna stop the drugs. They'll go a different route. And we got to get away from the ridiculous nature or notion that these boats are coming to America. Oh, we got to self-defend against these boats coming to America. These boats can't go more than about 100 miles without filling up for gas. There's so much that is insane about this policy.
Here, can't agree more with what he just said.
Yeah, so first of all, they only go about 100 miles. Venezuela is 2,000 miles from us. So that is not even close to possible for them to get here. But again, all we needed was a couple of people asking simple questions, right? And then Rand Paul talked about how, hey, 25% of the time we stop people for drugs, the Coast Guard does. It turns out they're not carrying drugs, we were wrong. So if we have a 25% error rate in the people we're killing, that is monstrous, right? That's not a small thing to do. 25%, at a bare minimum, 25% of the people we killed were the wrong guys and totally innocent. And then Anna, you made a point on CNN about this, how we return people to their home country, Colombia, et cetera.
Yeah, because they're not drug traffickers. I actually did not make that point. I believe it was Julia Ioffe who made the point. But yeah, they end up getting returned if they survive the attack to their home country because it turns out, oopsie daisy, they're not drug traffickers. By the way, I want to also be clear about one other thing. Even if they're drug traffickers, are we okay with our government just killing them?
Yeah, can they go to the middle of Baltimore? Or there's also drugs in West Virginia and Kentucky, lots of them, right?
Can't we just
and
protect our borders?
Can they just go up to a random guy in the holler and go, I think you might be dealing drugs, boom, just shoot him in the head. Because that's what they're doing here. No judicial look at this. It's literally called an extrajudicial killing because they're not presenting any evidence. And that's why they sent back the 3 people that they captured, because they have no evidence on them. They were claiming that they're terrorists, drug, blah, blah, blah. No, they're fishermen.
And let me say one other thing, because I want to be clear about how, for me, this is not a partisan issue. The Obama administration took a look at the Bush administration's war crimes, including the excessive use of drone strikes, and expanded it. Okay, Obama took Bush's drone war and put it on steroids. And we were very critical of it then. I'm critical of it now. I don't care if this is a Democratic administration or Republican administration. The way that we behave on the international stage matters. And killing potentially innocent people is just a devastating thing to do. It's immoral. But also, we should be considering blowback, guys. And we should be considering the fact that we have now soured our relationship with Colombia as a result of this, and Colombia was a longstanding ally. Okay, now with all that context, let's get to Colonel Douglas McGregor, that portion of Tucker Carlson's episode, because I think he is obviously knowledgeable, okay? He has a firm grasp of foreign policy, the potential blowback, and more importantly, the unforeseen consequences that the Trump administration should be considerate about as they potentially make their way closer to a regime change war, boots on the ground in Venezuela.
I recently went into DC and I talked to some people. Some of the people I talked to are just below the decision maker level. And it ultimately boiled down to it's time for us to be strong again. As though bombing hapless people in Venezuela or Colombia or Nicaragua or anywhere in Latin America is testimony to our greatness as a nation. And of course, the final straw is, well, we've got to destroy the drug problem where it originates. Well, I've got a big flash of the obvious. The drug problem originates here inside the United States. So, bombing these places isn't going to stop anything. It's not going to improve anything. It may turn out to rally all of Latin America against us. The evil Yankee who's intervening yet again inside Central and South America. We're blamed for almost everything that's wrong down there. All we're doing is saying, I guess you're right. Look what we're doing now. It's not going to change anything. But that means you've got to come home. This seems to be the thing that no one in Washington wants to do. Somebody said, Doug, what do you want to come home for?
That bit of insight was important to hear. It's important to know what the thinking in Washington is. But with that in mind, final video. This is Colonel McGregor talking about guerrilla groups and drug cartels and various threats to our soldiers should we decide to put boots on the ground in Venezuela.
Mrs. Machado, I don't know if she's married or not, so I call her Mrs. She may just be Miss Machado. She's the lady that just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and she's from Venezuela. And she said, if we're liberated by the US Armed Forces and they remove Maduro, our first act will be to move the Venezuelan embassy to Jerusalem.
What does that have to do with, I'm completely confused. Like what?
Well, you can't be that confused. I think she's hit on something very important. She's figured out where the power lies, and she's playing to the audience that makes the decisions. You're talking about this democracy business. We've always been a republic with limited democracy, but I think we can pretty much conclude that we're ruled now by a small group of extraordinarily wealthy people, billionaire oligarchs.
So, because of the political projects and political agenda of foreign countries, whether it be regime change in Venezuela, what's going down in Jerusalem, none of this impacts us as Americans, but we're going to potentially put our soldiers in harm's way, potentially get confronted by various guerrilla groups in Latin America who are apparently, according to Colonel McGregor, chomping at the bit to attack American soldiers. We're gonna do all that for what again? For what reason again?
Something about Lebanon. Okay, so
Hezbollah.
Okay, guys, a couple of things here is so important. First, I love the free speech. I love the marketplace of ideas. I'm okay if you call me corny about that and earnest and all that stuff. Because look, before when we had just mainstream media, everybody's sheep herded into these. Okay, you have a Republican, Democrat, you have to hate each other. Don't ever ask questions about war or anything else. All it took was a couple of guys, Tucker Carlson, Rand Paul, Tom Massey, etc., to ask a couple of questions. And all of a sudden we got a marketplace of ideas and people are going, wait, why? Wait, I thought Trump was the anti-war candidate.
Yeah.
And then, wait a minute, didn't we all conclude as a country that the war on drugs doesn't work? That the real problem is demand, not supply? That you can kill and spend as much money as you could possibly spend on trying to end the source, you're never going to end it. Because people want to make money. They're going to make money by meeting the demand in this marketplace. By the way, it's partly capitalism, right? You can't end capitalism, and it's just kind of an attack on that. But the last thing that the colonel said was super important. There's the right wing waking up and going, it's the billionaire oligarchs.
Yeah.
That's who rules us. And it's not just about, like, she's right, she's going, we will move our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem because that's what the pro-Israel radicals in America want. So don't worry, Venezuela will serve Israel. Why would that be relevant to America? No, it's only relevant to Larry Ellison and a couple other people, right? And they demand that all of American foreign policy, even about Venezuela, be about Israel instead.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And Marco Rubio has two problems here. One is he's funded by Larry Ellison, gave him $5 million that we know of, probably a hell of a lot more than that, back in 2016 when he was running against Trump, and only when he had already stamped on his head pro-Israel. And Marco Rubio said, I will serve Israel loyally. And Ellison then gave $5 million to a super PAC. But on top of that, Marco Rubio now realizes, hey, wait a minute, nobody's working for America anymore. And I'm Cuban, and my heritage and wants Cuba back for us.
Yeah.
And so since now I see the pro-Israel guys demanding everything for Israel, well, because if you don't know this, Richard Grenell, who's not a good guy from my point of view, but went and got a peace deal with the Venezuelans already.
Yeah.
And the Venezuelans agreed, and Trump said this on tape too, to give us all the oil contracts. So the oil companies were ecstatic, and then Marco Rubio comes in and goes, no. One, Israel doesn't agree, and two, if we get the oil deal, then we're gonna let Venezuela go but I want to knock out Venezuela so I can knock out Cuba.
That's exactly right.
Right?
So that's what I was talking about when I said there are multiple factors motivating the Trump administration to go forward with everything that's been going on with Venezuela. Marco Rubio hates the fact that he believes Venezuela is providing material support to Cuba, and he wants regime change in Cuba.
That's exactly right. So which part of this is America first?
None of it.
None of it. It's Israel first, Cuba second, Venezuela third. I mean, we're not even in the picture. This has nothing to do with helping American citizens. Nothing. And we're about to start a giant war. Half our fleet is surrounding Venezuela, and there's not even any debate about it.
It's crazy.
At least with Iraq, there was a giant debate. But your only hope, guys, now, this is the most ironic thing ever, is the oil companies are super pissed at Rubio because they're like, we had it. We were threatening war for us. That's how we normally do it, and then we got it. We're gonna rob the Venezuelan people on behalf of the oil companies. They're like, take the deal, and Rubio's like, no, Cuba second. So
it's disgusting.
So now we need the oil companies to topple Rubio so we can do a corrupt deal with Venezuela on their behalf of the oil companies so we don't go to war.
At the end of that episode, with the interview that Tucker Carlson did with the former addict, they weigh in on what can be done here to actually effectively tackle the overdose epidemic. I'm giving you that note because I think it's important. He obviously cares about that issue. I care about it deeply as well as someone living in LA who witnesses people dying on the streets on a daily basis. So please check that out. We'll include a link in the description box.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.